Hello, my name is Christopher Simpson, and this is the recording over my PLC project, Hanging with MLA, a webinar experiment. The problem that I addressed in this project had to do with the in-library MLA citation sessions that we have for our English 1302 students. In the course of these sessions, students learn about the basics of MLA standards and they get to practice citation methods. However, it occurred to me that our distance education students may not necessarily have the benefits of this kind of personal assistance in learning MLA citation. So, to approach this problem, I asked myself three questions. One, and perhaps the most important, was there a demand for transitioning these existing sessions to a webinar format? If this demand existed, which students groups had the most interest in participating in this kind of project? And third, in what ways would the sessions have to be modified to meet the needs of an online audience? The methodology I chose to do these webinars was I utilized Google Hangouts as a hosting platform. I decided to use Google's streaming service, the Hangouts, as my platform because I know many students have Google accounts. They are familiar with Google. They feel comfortable using their technology. And there is great value in having students use services they trust and that they're familiar with. To complement the Hangouts platform, I use Google Slides and Sheets. Google Slides is basically Google's version of Microsoft PowerPoint. Sheets is basically their version of Word. And because these work so well together with Google's existing services like Hangouts, I felt that it made sense to use both of these at the same time. I will now show you my Google Slides presentation and basically the steps in which I would go through in the course of these webinars. I would begin by taking students to the link that we would customarily use for our in-library sessions. And this is the page here. And on this page, we have the list of the 5 sources that we would use. And the process in which we would go through would be, I would click on a link like this, like so, and it would take them to one of the sources that we had prepared. We would examine the source. We would see what what kind of clues we could find as to identifying the sources, because one of the most important factors in any kind of citation is source identification. To help us identify the sources, besides just the visual clues, we would rely upon this PDF on MLA citation that is also provided through our library website. And so we would go through the 5 sources, correctly identify them, and once we had that down, once we knew what they were, we would then proceed to cite them in MLA citation style. And then the third and final part of the webinar would include, I would direct them to further MLA resources such as the Purdue OWL, and then we would have a Q&A session. My assessment method was twofold. One was the personal feedback that I received in the course of the webinar and at the end of them. And that feedback was mostly positive. And the students assured me that it had been helpful. I also had a Qualtrics survey that I sent out, which featured a lot of positive feedback. And so, having finished the MLA webinars and having gone through the feedback, 3 things became very apparent to me. The first is there is indeed a demand for these kind of webinars, particularly from our nursing students. Most of the participants in these webinars were nursing students, they were distant students, and they were having a lot of trouble struggling with the differences between MLA citation and APA citation. In many instances, I had students trying to bridge a connection between the two, and they were having a lot of trouble doing it. The second thing that I learned from this project was the Q&A sessions were most important to the students. And when we have these sessions in the library, we will often have a few students that will ask us questions afterwards. But I was kind of surprised by the amount of questions that they had for me afterwards. It seemed the students saw this as a prime opportunity to get their questions answered, and it is possible they felt more comfortable raising these questions away from their peers or professors. And the third thing that I learned is you cannot always predict attendance. Unfortunately, I didn't have the level of attendance that I had hoped for these webinars. But now that I know the importance of Q&A, the Q&A sessions, it's obvious that for the future MLA sessions that I would like to hold, not only must they be retooled in order to give more time to Q&A, but all future publicity for the webinars will need to place an emphasis on this feature, because now I know this is obviously of great importance to the students, and I understand why the need for these MLA webinars are coming from for the overwhelming audience, and that there's a great level of confusion about APA citation and having to make that brief transition over to MLA. Thank you very much for viewing my presentation. I've enjoyed this project. It has given me a lot of great experience in synchronous learning, and I hope to continue doing this in the future. Have a good day.